This segment, we're going to be talking about self-image. And I know all of us, we have such a great self-image, right? So we can tell everybody how to do it. So we all struggle with this, right? Every woman that I've ever met has issues with self-image. We just do. We always compare ourselves to one another. We're always feeling inadequate. You know, when you take a picture, what do? First thing is you go to the things that look bad and you bring out, oh, my hair's a mess, or oh, I wish I'd done something, you know, whatever. But self-image is so critical for us to be able to portray who we are, and whether we're in business or whether we're teachers or whether we're Christian believers in the church, we need to have that synergy, that confidence, that presence.
Yes.
As we're around people, it's important that we have that. We have that open door that God has given us. It's interesting. I use the bumblebee as an example. I want you to picture a bumblebee. You know, he's big and fat. He's pretty. Some of them are kind of fuzzy and hairy. They have little tiny wings. So they are not designed to be able to fly. There is no reason why a bumblebee should be able to fly, but yet they do it. And I think a lot of times we give ourselves permission to fail in our self-image because we think, oh, I don't measure up, or I'm not built like that person. I don't look like that. I don't talk like that. And you know, so it becomes an issue, and it's permission to fail. So what I hope we get from this session is to encourage everybody who's listening, and all of us here, that we can have that self-esteem, that we can reach in within ourselves and pull out what we need to be confident in who we are, because we need to be, right? We are women that were created with purpose and destiny, and we need to portray that. So self-esteem simply means accepting and appreciate yourself for who you are. So what have you learned? I want to stop here and just ask us all to talk about this for a minute. What comes to mind when you think about your self-image or self-esteem? What's one point you could say that you've learned, or something you'd like to share? Maybe a struggle even.
Well, it's interesting you bring up this topic, because I think it's something you have to constantly work on, and being able to acknowledge your struggles. You know, for me, the self-image, some days I feel really high and really like, yeah. And then other days I just look in the mirror like, oh, you're getting old, you're this, you're gonna put on weight. And it's just this whole, really just being able to talk to yourself and just have that conversation with yourself and say, I am enough. I look fine. Even with a few extra pounds, or even if I not looking the best or this, you know, I'm still okay. I'm fine, you know. And really, for me, it's a constant. It's day by day with me. I think it's day by day with me. Most of the times, my self-image is good, but sometimes, you know, you get through those periods, you know, and you have those times, and you have to really just do these self-affirmations to yourself and believe it for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I have an ugly day. That's related.
Yes.
Just nothing works, nothing looks good. You know, I just have an ugly day.
Yeah.
But I want to get to the others and listen to you too. But let me just interject something here. One thing I want to point out is that when you walk in that confidence, it shows.
Yeah.
And you know what we see as beauty, it might be a certain look or a certain height or certain thinness or whatever. But in reality, what we're seeing is confidence. And so when we walk in that confidence, then we look more beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's just something to say.
Yeah, I know for me, being an athlete, my self-esteem and my self-identity was so wrapped up in what I did. You know, being a student, it was always about what I did. And it wasn't to the point that I realized my self-esteem is really in who I am that made the difference. You know, it wasn't in how many jumpers I can make, championships I can win, or if I got straight A's, because sometimes that would set me up for a false expectation. And I would set that false expectation even when dealing with looking at myself. But I just got to the point where it was like, okay, it doesn't matter what I did or didn't do that day. I don't have to, you know, we're moms, we're business owners, so I don't have to hit every part of the to-do list to make myself feel worthy. It's because of who I am that I'm already worthy. And I think that was a big shift for me, transitioning from having being so, attainment and goal oriented, but also based on that controlling who I was. Like God had to shift that for me as a person. Like that's no longer your identity. This is who your identity is. And I was able to gain that confidence in that.
Now, back when I used to do some modeling, do what's called an all call, where they just call it a message. You have 30, 40 minutes. Mine would have stayed one little part, one little photo shoot. And it was not fun. I had to set myself up to go into that thing. Because you start measuring yourself up to everybody else. And oh, she's so pretty. Oh, no, there's no way. And when you walk in there, what I found over time was it wasn't so much who was the prettiest. It was who had the most confidence.
Yeah.
When you walk in there, you control the room. That's the person you want.
True.
That's true.
True.
Tell me what you have to say about this.
I think it's interesting that we have more muscles, and it's actually harder for us to frown than it is for us to smile. But yet we frown a lot more often than we do. Smile, and when we laugh, it just produces joy inside of us. I think that really shows in our demeanor and the atmosphere that we create, but also the demeanor on our face. And so I think that's a big thing. What's our attitude? Kind of like your confidence. Are you going to have a good attitude about things, or are you going to have a bad or a worse attitude? Talk all the time about our words and making sure that we use positive words, with my clients like that. And I think it really makes a huge difference when we use positive words of ourselves, like you were saying, Shannon. Positive words can really make a huge difference in the way that we feel about ourselves and the way that we carry ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to the photo, when we look at it and pick it apart and we see all the negatives, then that brings us down.
Yeah.
But if we'll look at the positives, oh, my hair actually looks good today.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I like my eyes, whatever it might be, it does boost our confidence. So
Yeah.
when we're more positive, when our attitude is right, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
So what dictates your self-worth? Eleanor Roosevelt said this: no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. It's so powerful.
Yes.
We have to take that in, we have to accept it.
Mhm.
When somebody makes us feel less than, it's because we've allowed them.
Right.
But if we come up against that and say, no, I don't have to take that,
Mhm.
it changes everything. Henry Ford said, when you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right.
Mhm.
It is. It's the
It's
attitude.
true.
You
Yeah.
just psych yourself up for it.
Yeah.
And that may sound like it's something false, because either I am or I'm not. But not necessarily. A lot of it is how you perceive yourself, how you perceive your capabilities, how you perceive who you are. And so, if I ask you that question, what dictates your self-worth? I want you to think about it, because I'm going to ask all of you again. What dictates your self-worth? I have this picture that I go to all the time. It's of a little kitten. I've seen it. And he's looking in the mirror and he's doing a self-portrait. And the portrait is this mighty lion, this ferocious king of beasts. And when he looks in the mirror, that's what he sees.
Yeah.
He doesn't see a little kitten.
Right.
And so that speaks volumes to me. Can we see ourselves in that light?
Mhm.
That's hard to portray that. When I see all the negatives, I see all the bad. But why do we see the lack instead of the good? Why don't we see the positive in ourselves? What is it that makes us go to the negative side of things? Does that help us to improve? Not necessarily. Most of us are thinking the precipice, So what dictates your self-worth? How do you see that tiger, that big lion from Little? What's your key? What's a tip?
I know for me, my confidence comes from God. Just being a believer and a little girl of faith, and now a woman of faith. I think that has really propelled me. Despite the changes I've had, just battling with lupus, taking medicine, going from one point being almost 200 pounds to Then on the flip side, being about $140 and people saying, well, you're too skinny, you're too skinny. But then when I was heavier, I was too big. So I just got to the point where, for one, I'm not designed to please people.
Right.
But more importantly, like you said, with self-esteem, it's basically about how I feel, about myself, you know, whether I was too skinny or too big, or am I healthy? You know, am I in the best position? Do I feel the best to be able to do the things that God created me to be? And I think for me, even with the changes in my face, my skin, it's really my confidence in God that keeps me going and seeing the beauty that He created in me. Even I was on a cruise and I had a kid ask me, how are you both black and white? And I was just like, I just stopped and I just started like looking, thinking, God's like, that's so beautiful that He said it. He was talking about my skin, but I was like, that's how God created all people. And so it allowed me to connect with Him, but it just showed me that, you know, beauty is more than what we see on the outside for that kid that asked that question.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was very.
I love that because, you know, it's so true. We allow other people to dictate to us, you know, you're too fat, too skinny. That's beautiful because you have to determine where you feel the best about. Might be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And for you, it might be skinnier than what other people should be. It's what are you the most comfortable with? Who is that person to you? Now, of course, there's disorders.
Yes, ma'am.
Talk about it now, but because sometimes people get the point that they can't be skinny enough.
Right.
That's something that they need to deal with. I'm talking about generally. You need to be comfortable in your skin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who else? What dictates your self-worth?
I think for me, my purpose dictates it because, you know, people fail and the way you look and that thing is temporary. You know, I don't look like how I looked when I was 20, 21, but I'm embracing me at 46. And I like that, you know, and it changes. It's temporary, it changes. But for me, purpose, that dictates my work because some days I might have a bad day and I'm not feeling worthy or pretty or this or that. But when I look around and I start operating in my purpose, that brings my worth because it's like, you know what, forget all the temporal stuff, forget all the fluff and things that's temporary. When I start, like when I feel really bad about myself, I call somebody or I see how can I help somebody or what can I work on today to help somebody else out. So when I get beyond myself and start walking in my purpose and doing what I know I do well, you know, and then checking on somebody else, that gives me worth. Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me, I read, I've been in this practice since January, really reading the Proverbs almost every day. And then I declare the proverb out loud. And all that proverb that I'm declaring is about who God says I am. And so it really makes me feel good because, I mean, God thinks highly of us when we're doing His will. And so, you know, and I really kind of cut out the evil parts of the proverb. And I focus on the good stuff.
Right.
They confuse,
Right.
Because, you know, I'm not going to declare something over myself like the weak or da 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 da. You know, I want to declare the righteous are this and the right, you know, and this happens, you know, to somebody who seeks Him. And so I always declare the more positive parts of the Proverbs because that's what's going to build me up, right? And I don't want to tear myself down. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
so that's what helps me a lot.
Yeah, and that's the opinion that matters, right? It's God's opinion.
Yes.
God created us. And, you know, He decided, the Bible tells us that He decided what color eyes we would have, you know,
Yeah.
how tall or short we would be, what our nose would look like, what color our skin would be. He decided all this.
Right.
And if He's pleased with it, then we should be too.
That's
Right?
right.
So much in society right now struggles with that. you know, but we believe that as Christians, as believers here on the show,
Yeah.
we firmly believe that God did that. And
Yeah.
He created us just like we are.
Mhm.
And we need to be happy with it because he was
Yeah.
very pleased with the way he created us.
Yes.
So I think, you know, ways that we can improve ourselves would be, you know, to take some of these things to heart. And as we wrap up today on this show, I just want to encourage our listeners to think about that. Think about the best of you. You know, look at yourself in the mirror and pick out your best qualities. You know, think about what you're good at and have your attitude in those things and just, you know, accentuate the positive. And I think you'll find out that every day is better like that. And if you walk in that confidence, then you'll have more influence. So thank you for tuning in today at Chief Women Arise podcast, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Awesome.